Welcome to Make Break. Today I have Garrett Barbuto, and it's going to be a great conversation. I'm happy to have you on the show.
Hell yeah, man. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I it's my pleasure, and also I just wanted to give a bit of context to listeners, why you and I are chatting. And first of all, you are a musician, and you do have your own you front your own band. I'd like you to maybe, if you could, I'm trying something a little different this time, but if you could tell people a little bit more about what you're up to creatively and professionally right now, uh, that would be great.
Good place to start. Well, so why don't I keep it broad strokes and then we can mine out some little nuggets as we go. So I moved to
Sounds good.
Calgary about 6 years ago, and with all the spare time I had, having never been here or having even known anybody before I moved who lived in Calgary, I thought I'm going to throw myself into the music scene as a way to, meet friends and keep myself busy. And that turned into me wanting to be a part of a bar band. Didn't realize I was the leader till probably about 6 months in. And then once I realized I was the leader, I decided, well, okay, well, what do we want to do? Yeah, we want to play bars, we want to book with certain agents, and we want to get into certain venues. But then we also want to be artists and we want to release our own music. And that's when I realized, well, shit, I don't really know how to do that. So with the way that our name was manufactured, being my name first, followed by the Hot Pursuit, I thought, well, what an opportunity to maybe work on some solo stuff so that by the time the band wants to get into writing and recording, maybe I have a bit of experience so that I could actually be an effective leader. So that was kind of the whole purpose of the project that we're going to talk about today, I'm sure, came from just me meeting somebody locally who we'll get into, who has sort of been like a confidant, mentor, teacher, and kind of going to him and saying, hey, I don't know what we can do. I just want to learn. And I basically, as the process unfolded, we decided we kind of liked each other and that some of the output was actually listenable. So maybe we should continue doing it. And so we wrote 25 songs and demos over the course of 2 years. And then we picked 9 of them we wanted to record professionally, which we're in the middle of recording now. And we're going to release, with your help, buddy, uh, very soon here.
Yep. Yeah. This is the good part about what I get to do is that I get to have the conversation where we get to learn a bit more about each of our people, but we get to do it in a way that's I don't know, share more of the process. But it's also super self-affirming. I thought there was somebody online who I follow on Instagram. She goes by the handle Kitty Nor, and she had a video about how creating content is actually incredibly healing. And I'm like, whoa, as far as hooks go, that's got me interested. Okay, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have to say about that, how to
Yeah.
follow up that. Um, she had a pretty compelling point, which is that to see yourself on camera, to record yourself, first of all, it major step, right?
Hmm.
Major obstacles need to be traversed already. Then you post it, and then you do it again. So in terms of trust in your creative self in a public setting, whoa. And this is kind of why we play with live ammo in terms of these conversations with not just our artists. I mean, it's also other creatives and authors and people that aren't, clients or whatever. It doesn't, it's at the end of the day, this show specifically is for the creative process. And the reason I want it to be about the creative process is because I fucking struggle with it so much. And
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be fun if it wasn't a struggle, right?
that's funny that you say that. Uh, Tell me more about that. I feel like have you had those struggles as yourself as a creative?
Yeah, while also kind of having the perspective of all of this is house money because I never really thought I'd ever be in a band or lead a band or play gigs live. So everything is kind of playing with house money at the end of the day. The part of what's fun about songwriting is that, I mean, to compare some of your endeavors, like it's different than writing a book, right? Where it's a very, very long process. What's nice about a song is you can quit halfway through and you've probably wasted 5 minutes of your life, you know? And you can chip away at it
Fair
a
enough.
little bit daily. So that's what I like about it, is that every time you step up to the plate, you really got nothing to lose and everything to gain. And because like you're saying, when you get to hear something back, when you're like, oh man, I just really like this. And have a bit of surprise factor to it. It's beautiful. And I would say it is also a bit healing as well.
So take me back through that journey. You moved to Calgary. That's where you call home now. But where were you born?
Yeah, so I grew up in a place called South Porcupine, Ontario. It's very close to Timmins, Ontario, so small, isolated northern Ontario town. And one of the things that made it unique is that it only had three radio stations. I don't know what it has these days. And this was before the country genre was as big as it is these days, because we had two classic rock stations and a pop station. Nobody really listened to country where I was from, which is obviously quite different than out here in Alberta. And so when I moved away from Timmins to go to university in Waterloo, Ontario, I just assumed that everybody around me knew all of these classic rock anthems and standards and stuff like that. But that's when I started to realize, oh, I guess that is a little bit unique to me. And as I slowly but surely put my band together, that was all a common thread for all of us, is that we had an attachment to classic rock. But obviously with those guys growing up here, it's a little bit of a different journey as to how they found themselves in that particular genre.
Interesting. So would you say that you guys rally behind that together? Like you share that kindred sort of understanding that like what you consider to be like scripture or like shared mono culture was like not at all when you got there?
Well, the bottom line is that we put our set list together from about a year of playing open mics, right? Where you get to do about 3 to 5 songs if you're lucky.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, yeah, this Billy Joel song works. This one doesn't work. This Bob Seger song works. That one doesn't work. And okay, well, I guess we've got our 45 songs. Let's start booking gigs. But yeah, that's sort of been the thing that's unified us, is that there's certainly a public perception in some of the bars we play from the older generation, call them the baby boomers, that when we play our songs, they're like, oh, young people don't know these songs. Like, how are you guys getting away with this? Like, this is really unique, I suppose. And we're sort of like, I don't know, like we're playing these songs and I'm seeing not a lot of wrinkles on the faces of people in the audience, and they all know how Proud Mary goes, and they all know how Free Falling goes, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So that's been the really cool part, because as a writer, as an artist, now, when I hear the songs that you've heard from some of my heroes, like I've mentioned so far, like the Springsteens of the world, nothing about listening to them makes me any different than anybody else. 'Cause we all hear what's on the record. But what does make my situation a bit different is that I've seen what these songs can do. And I've gotten behind the wheel of these songs a little bit and see how they still have a lasting impact. So when you kind of start from that center and then you try to work your way around it, it's okay, well, what about the song? Right. And as I've gotten more into writing, I've some different times like, oh, it's the lyric. And I'm like, oh, no, no, it's the groove. No, it's the way that it's the performance, and that kind of stuff will just, again, is part of the struggle that makes it fun to me.
So you grew up in a musical household or no? Not really.
No, not really. I think my nono might have had some talent, but I never met him, so I'm not. It's just from stories I kind of hear. But no, my mom and dad certainly weren't musicians, and the only reason why they put me in singing lessons and piano lessons, well, they force us into piano lessons like any good parent would do, right? And they want to give their kid a chance to do something cool at a cocktail party in 20 years.
Yeah.
And we, being in Timmins, traveling a lot mainly for hockey tournaments And yeah, it was mostly hockey tournaments. An 8-hour drive, you listen to a lot of music, and I would just sit in the back seat and sing along to Hotel California album, or, you know, Def Leppard, Hysteria was another big one, Guns N' Roses. And after a while, my mom was like, "Oh, we should put you in some lessons." And so we did that. And then we did that with piano, and then that started to cut into road hockey time. So eventually I dropped the piano and I just kept doing the singing lessons thing. And one of the things that is so funny about that experience is just how anti rock and roll that part of my life was, right? When you're doing these, we called them festivals, but they're really like recitals, right? So you'd pick your 3 to 5 songs from some random musical from the 1940s, from with songs that nobody ever heard of, and you practice and practice and practice, and then eventually you get called out of class at 10 a.m. in the morning, and you go to some church somewhere, and you'd sing in front of a room of 20 people, where no applause was welcomed or allowed, and then you would get adjudicated or judged publicly on your performance. So, like, incredibly nerve-wracking experience, right? So I had always
Yeah.
associated that with music a little bit growing up. I was like, yeah, I enjoy doing it when I'm just singing along in the car, but like, I don't know if I love that part. You know, like one of the things my old man would do, and I love this, was that we'd be listening to, again, to the radio, and we'd get back in the parking lot at home, and I go to open the door, and he'd reach his hand across and be like, "Let's just let the song finish out." And I always love that because we'd heard the song millions of times. You know what I mean? But that was when I was like, this is what I like about music, this part of it. As far as it being judged publicly and no applause allowed or no girls in the room, it's like, I don't like that part.
Yeah, it seems antithetical for rock and roll.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
so I mean, you growing up, you have lots of heroes musically. Where's the and am I right in thinking that there was then like a pretty big break in that period between you doing music when you were younger and then older picking it up again?
Yeah, that's right. So eventually, I think I just got old enough to be like, well, I'm not really enjoying doing these recitals. But music is everywhere, so I'm not, it's not like I'm leaving it. I'm not going to do this anymore, you know?
Mm.
And down the line, yeah, maybe I'll learn how to play a guitar, and so I can sit around a campfire one day and entertain my buddies. So I did put that on hold because a big source of pride for me, and this is relates back to the struggle thing a little bit too, which makes the music fun a lot more struggle than, let's say, something like the education struggle, because I love the education struggle growing up in high school. I went to a high school where good grades were not easy to come by. So I was a really good student. I took a lot of pride in being a good student, and I knew that it would take me places that it only really could take me. Being, getting to go to university and getting a degree and getting a job that way, rather than, going to work at the mine in town, which is just as definitely lucrative of a career, but just a different type of career is, I suppose, what I wanted. But education, in a way, kind of broke my heart after a few years, because I realized once I got to university, that there's just a system. You just got to pass the tests, So it's eventually the novelty got lost on me, where I didn't take as much pride in it anymore, and that's when music kind of came back in, and I was looking for something that was uh, not quite as copy paste as education, and just, hey, stay up the night before, memorize the multiple choice answers. And let's be honest, nowadays you get a whole lot of ways to cheat your way around things. Um,
Seriously.
but once I realized with music, I was like, well, I'm never going to win this or solve this system. It'll take me to my grave. So it kind of started as a retirement plan at that point. I was like, well, this will be good. This will keep me busy um, for years, and let's just see where it goes. But to hit your question a bit more head on, the big moment for me is when I was living in Toronto doing my internships. Again, didn't know anybody in Toronto. I was living at my mom's place. And I was like, well, I'll pick up a guitar. I got all this time during my internship. But at the same time, I saw the Eagles documentary. And the Eagles were such a profound influence on me because they're singers, right? All five of them at their peak. And mainly, I would say, were all really great singers. They happen to all also be really good at their instruments, which is that's what made them such a great band. But that's what really drew me to them was the harmonies and all the arrangements were, again, in retrospect, now I can say like really complex and well thought out. So when I saw that documentary, I saw the way that the girls were looking at Glenn Fry when he played Take It Easy. I'm like, that I think I could enjoy doing, right? So that's what drew me to really committing to learning to play the acoustic guitar. And I did so while learning a bunch of bad habits, which I'm still working out today. But that's just rock and roll. But that's also when I got turned on to Jackson Browne. And when I started listening to Jackson Browne, that's when I realized I wanted to write songs because Jackson Browne was the first time I saw anybody be vulnerable yet cool as a man, right? I think females have been doing
Interesting.
that a lot longer, a lot more successfully than men have done so. So that's what really made me realize, well, I want to try to pass that gift out to the world as well.
Huh. I mean, so how long ago exactly was that you started up again? What year was that when
Yeah, I
you
was
saw the
20.
documentary?
So yeah, I was
Oh,
20. And that would have been, I was still in school, maybe like 2016, 2017. I'm sure there's
all right.
easy math to do, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's roughly around that time. I mean,
Yeah.
so shortly after like having that, I guess, return to music as a key part of creative expression, I think for me, it's always fascinating to seeing like which medium someone lands up in, but it's also kind of like a given. I think for me, I gotta ask, like, when did this, how long was the difference between like knowing that's what you wanted to get into and when you actually started writing your own songs?
Yeah. Well, not very long. And you might hear that and be romanticized by that idea, but I actually think I probably started writing songs too soon. Although there was no stakes in them, they're nowhere to be found. They were never really recorded, but I I started learning a couple songs, and then yeah, right away I was like, yeah, I can do this. I know how to do this. Um, but as soon as I moved to Calgary, so that would be about 6 years ago. So about 2 years of me kind of mucking my way through chords, just cowboy chords and nothing special. Um, that's when I started to look at myself, not as an artist, but more as an organization, right? And what's best for the organization, I learned when I got to Calgary and started playing live is that I need to just work on my musicianship because I was pointed out to me very quickly by friends of mine still to this day and mentors of mine that, yeah, you got some bad habits. You're self-taught. So you're going to have bad habits. And
Mm.
some of that's always okay. Some of that's just who you are. And some of that is just rock and roll. But you gotta do some work, man. Like just take 2 years and work on your performing, right? Including things like banter, because you can't talk at this volume to a room on a mic. It's got to be at this volume, right? And things like that, and learning what makes a band and what makes things work. And then it's going to be good for the organization for you to then circle back to the writing. Because I think I had proven to myself enough in the short time frame that you're asking about that I could do it, right? But I also knew that there was a lot more upside if I just put that away for a little bit and come back to it, which is what I ended up doing.
So then I think my next question is like about performance. So when you perform live, do you ever feel like there's a difference between Garrett who performs and the Garrett who writes?
Yeah, man. One of the things when my parents split, that was obviously super tough on our entire family. But one of the things that sucked the most was that my mom and dad didn't want to listen to that music anymore because it just reminded them, maybe in a bad way, of how things used to be. So in a way, I like to think when I'm out there performing that I'm playing for that kid, right? Who didn't get to listen to those songs with his family for as long as he might have liked to. So that's the one sort of sentimental answer. But the other answer is that again, in my training, so to speak, which is obviously ongoing and constant. But in my earlier years of, playing bars and figuring stuff out, I definitely followed the mantra of, rock and roll is about it's about going over the top to see what's on the other side. And I certainly did that. But sometimes what's on the other side is not always as sexy as you think it's going to be, because I started to realize, like, oh, well, look at Elvis. Yeah, you got to be like Elvis. But then I realized, like, I'm not Elvis, you know? And, and one of the things that somebody said to me once recently that stuck is that about my whole band is that they said, yeah, when you guys get up and play, like, there's an apathy about what you guys are doing. And I think that might be cooler than you trying to be this big showman, because don't get me wrong, when the crowd gets humming and stuff like that, and I've had the pleasure of having some experience with that, which is also critical, is if you get that for the first time and you're on a big stage, for example, it could scare you, man. But I've, had people falling into me and bottles breaking and stuff like that. So I know that I can handle it. But what I've learned is that just let that, sort of produce itself. Don't try to manufacture it. If an audience is just not with you, well, it might be your performance, but more importantly, it just is what it is. So I try to just nowadays worry about just delivering a really good performance and playing really good defense and not worrying so much about offense, you know?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, so I guess that question leads into a different version of it for me, but like, I guess if you had to tap into, like, people talk so much about authenticity and being authentic. How do you tap into emotional authenticity on stage without burning out?
Yeah, well, the first part of it, I would say, is that that's where I'm happy to have my band, because
Mm.
those guys, and someone else has brought that up to me before too, who's seen me with and without my band, seem to bring out a certain comfort in me. And obviously, the more comfortable you are, the more authentic you are. So, like, for example, I mentioned banter earlier, and I worked on it, and I worked on it enough to know that it's just not my thing. So nowadays, when we're doing our you know banter that we have to do a minimum amount of, I turn to my bass player and say, okay, this is when you talk about the specials. And I'm just going to kind of remain here and worry about my own performance and just try to make sure that, when we do band on the run, that I get my 5 notes in there towards the end that I know is a challenge for me. And that's where my head's going to be at. So I don't know if
Mm.
that answers the question or not, but
It
that,
does.
yeah,
You're
that's
playing to your
kind of.
strengths and you're not going to like make apologies for your weaknesses. I get that.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's exactly it. And again, getting back to the mantra, and I think it's going to be the same thing with marketing as well, about going over the top to see what's on the other side. I've just seen that I'm not that type of raw guy. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to give you the strongest performance of the songs, and I'm going to deliver the songs as best as I can. But I'm not going to tell you to get up off your seat unless you're not already off your seat, you know?
Interesting. I mean, it 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 is interesting because there's so many different artists that I've seen over the years across so many different genres, and everybody has a completely different way of, like, it's on a spectrum. There's been like people that almost, I swear to God, they talk longer than they actually perform, and then I got other people that didn't say a single word. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and sometimes it's, you got to earn the gig you're given, right? And every gig
mm,
is different. But the one thing to finish maybe your thought is that I think authenticity, at least in my journey so far, has been more about removing things than adding things. Because when I'm a young guy in the open jam scene, there's not a lot of young guys. Everybody wants to give you advice, right? And I love advice, but my least favorite thing is unsolicited advice. So uh, sometimes you get so much input that, and from people that you respect and that care about you, are coming at it from a place of love, that you start to add things. At least I did, because I wanted to test whether their advice was right. And over time, I've some stuff has been right, but some stuff has had to been burn the tape on all that. So that's part of it. But again, getting back to the gig, right? And how that has to kind of match your authenticity. If I'm sitting around someone's backyard or having a fire, then yeah, I'll talk about some songs and whether they're my own or not, I'll explain to them, what a flat seven is and why it changed country rock and how that happened and all that. But if I'm at a bar, no, it's how quick can we transition to the next song? How many solos can we get in before they start to get tired of us doing solos? So like that I think is part of authenticity too, because yeah, you want to be like the type of artist. Of course, we all want to be in the Saddle Dome, telling a captivated audience about the background of some song, like Bryan Adams did a few weeks ago when I was there. But Bryan Adams has been doing this for 40 years. Like, do you think he started off his very
Yeah,
first gigs telling 5-minute stories about Summer of '69? Like, no, nobody gave a shit. But he went and did the work, right? Built
right.
up his repertoire. And obviously he did a lot of other things right. And he has a lot of talent. But I'm trying to get to the point in my music journey where I do have that type of setting where I could tell somebody about the background of the song and they're interested and it's appropriate in the setting. But I haven't gotten there yet. And I'm hoping that this album is going to help me do that.
What does music do for you? This is a big one coming your way, so I'm gonna ramp it up a little bit
Yeah.
here. But what does music
Uh,
do for you that? Oh, sorry. What were you gonna
no,
say?
no, finish. Yeah, please finish.
What does music do for you that nothing else can?
Yeah. It's a really, it's an answer I'm not proud of, but it's the most honest one, which is, it's the power, man. Makes you feel powerful. And, at the core of every human is this desire to feel important, right? From that Carnegie book, I remember the name of it. Um, and it's a
When
little, it's a little bit of that, it's just
make friends and influence people, is that it?
that's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and, and I'm no exception to that, but the music makes me, well, I shouldn't say just music. I would say my particular medium of music. Yeah, it just makes you feel powerful in a healthy way, I guess.
But it's an honest answer, and I like that. Um,
Yeah, it's not one I would want to trim and throw out there to the world, but it's probably because the other thing too, and we talked about this before. What I love about music, which is a different question than what you asked, is how you get to strategize, you know. And for example, like in a lot of in the years that we were talking about, where we're hustling and we're playing, or Friday, Saturdays, 9 to 1 at some, random bar where there's a guy in a bar stool telling you about, he's not just some guy and he knows music and all that. Those years for me is kind of like the equivalent of an athlete being in the minors, where there's no pressure on you. You can just work on your craft. And it's the
Interesting.
craft that I enjoy. The difference, of course, with music is that you get to decide when you want to be in the majors. And now more than ever, there's no gatekeeper saying you can't be in the majors. You can be in the majors right away. You can say, I'm going to start uploading songs to the DSPs and I'm going to start promoting myself as an artist. For me, I've always tried to be a bit more methodical because I never have been that impressed by myself. But not only that, I also take my talent really seriously. And for me, what's the difference if I'm 27 or I'm 29, right? In terms of when I start releasing myself into the world, which, as you mentioned earlier about this Kitty Noir person, like that does sound really healing, but I want to fight a little bit longer before I kind of come back to that.
I see what you mean. Well, if you stripped away the career aspect, the touring, the streaming, would you still write songs?
Great question. I would not write songs on my own. I would collaborate with people because that is the only way that it's also fun for me. I don't, this is a bit of a separate tangent, but no, to be honest, no, I don't think if there was no audience or there was no strategy or long game that I was playing, I don't know if I would write songs. I don't think I would, but if I had a band of guys that I love deeply, um, that would want to write songs with me, then hell yeah, I would make sure I got my parts done.
That's honest. I like that. That's good. Okay, so then let's pivot a little bit here then. There's this feeling that music gives you that nothing else can give, or at least there's one that's so specific to music. But when it comes to like the actual philosophy and growth around music, like how do you measure creative progress when the world measures metrics?
Yeah, that's a really good question because one of the sort of, what's the right word? Unsavory gifts of learning about writing and writing yourself is that you start to see songs from a songwriter's perspective, right? And I think, and again, it's good and bad because I can't not have lyrics appear in my head like the Star Wars intros as I hear them. Other people don't hear that or see that, I guess, visually, or they don't know what time signature it is, right? And for me, I'm not great with knowing what chords it is at all times, by the way. I'm still working on that. Um, but for me to measure my own development would be recognizing what choices you're making and why. Because, for example, there's a song that's going to be on the album called Sunshine Coast. And it's this fast, shuffly blues type of song. And this was fairly late into the project where I felt like I was understanding what I was doing, which a lot of it had to do with phrasing, and not rushing things and um, realizing that, hey, you sang the same note 4 notes in a row, maybe try another one, just to make it more interesting and just to see what's on the other side. But the first line is, someday I'm gonna go to the sunshine. And I didn't realize that I was bending that go. And only when Neil, my partner in this project, pointed it out, was I sort of like, "Fuck, I should have known that I was doing that. And next time I will realize that I'm doing a little bend, because the big bends, like the big blues bends, those are obvious. But the little subtleties and just realizing the little subtleties of what makes certain songs work, I think that's what the development and the measure of success is.
Interesting. That's a really interesting way of looking at it, because that insight of just like it's an awareness is that I think that does separate the pros from the amateurs in a lot of realms, not just music, but specifically in creativity. It's a really tough one to know as well. It's really tough, really
Well,
tough.
and the thing is, it bothered me a little bit when I would meet with Neil, who again is a consummate professional in every sense of the word, and we would either talk about songs and songs we were trying to steal from, or songs we were working on, and he would be so black and white about it, right? Like, yeah, it's a 1 4 5, and then it goes to a 2 in the pre-chorus. And I'm sort of like, man, like, why are you saying it like that? But it's like, because that's what it is. You know what I mean? Because that, from a songwriter's perspective, that those what those are what the choices are. And it took me a while to realize that, you know? Because while all of that is definitely true, the thing that I'm coming around to lately is that in the project, I gave myself to the process, right? And I said the idea was to fail fast and write songs fast and get them done fast so that we had a lot of stuff to pick away at. But what I've realized lately, and I think it's a universal thing for me, is that be okay not finishing something or not starting something if you don't have a good lyric or a good melody, or hopefully both. Because I think sometimes in the project, I felt like I had a good melody and I didn't want to wait till I had a good lyric. And so I just stuck with whatever was there and it made the song lesser than it could have been. Right.
Interesting.
And that's
Interesting.
okay. That's okay for that phase because this project was about learning, you know? But I think going forward as I write stuff, yeah, I want all my songs in some way to have a good melody and a good lyric at some point, hopefully both, you know?
Yeah, I mean, ideally. Um,
Ideally, yeah. While
yeah,
also
like
while also being able to look at it from the lens of like, yeah, okay, but that's just a 1, 4, and a 5, which any idiot can work with, but sometimes that's okay too, you know?
interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it reminds me of like when not reminds me, it makes me think of when it comes to um like the craft in terms of collaboration and production. I guess I want to know like when you're collaborating, how do you protect your artistic vision without closing yourself
Yes.
off?
Such a good question, man, because that is definitely one of my Achilles heels. Um, is that working with Neil, it took me a long time, too long, to be able to say, no, I think you're wrong. Because I felt intimidated because this is a guy that's released several albums and is, you know, forgotten more about music than I know about music. But um it's just a trust thing at the end of the day, while still listening, right? Because I'll tell you a story because um we needed like two more songs done for the album. I had this song that I started on piano a while ago, and I always thought it was kind of a cool progression from a guy who doesn't really know how to play piano. And it's clear from the way that the song went, or from the progression, that it was somebody just who got lucky. I think I just got lucky with this one. And so I started playing it on guitar, and Neil was like, "Yeah, that's a great start. Like lyrically, it's good. Let's work on that." And as we worked on it, we got into a big discussion about the use of a major seven note. And I was telling him, I was like, I don't want to be Dave Grohl. Like, this is not what we're doing. But he kept, dude, I'm telling you it's gonna work. I'm telling you, just do it. And so of course when we're in the studio, I'm gonna just lay it down as he intends, right? And I'll go back and listen to it. And if I really hate it, then I'll have to have that discussion. Most times that happened in the project, I conceded. And I don't think there were too many times where Neil wasn't right. This was the first time where I was like, no, I'm dropping this one. I'm taking this back to my band. I think they'll know what I want to do with it. And that's
Mm.
what we've done. And then we recorded a version of it just on an iPhone. And I showed it to him and he was like, yeah, I don't get it, man. I don't know why you're doing it like that. But then everyone else I showed it to was like, this is great. This is the best thing you've done. So yeah, it's hard because you want to listen to experience and to the
That's a tough one.
professionals that you're paying for and that you trust,
Yeah.
but you also, yeah, like eventually, again, you have to earn your own kind of voice in it and be like, no, I know why it works. This is why I like it. And this is what we're doing.
What's the best piece of advice you could give to somebody? Because I believe we believe in like this is part of why what this is for is, and I
Yeah.
think that you can learn something the best when you give the advice. So it's time for some unsolicited advice from Garrett Barbuto. Now, and so like if you had like advice for another musician, like currently trying to make it, or break through, very thematic, phrasing. What would that advice
What would
be?
it be? Yeah. Well, because I'm glad you mentioned I do not like to give advice, but I will try. Couple of things come to mind. First one being, uh, don't be afraid to hire or seek professional counsel. A lot of people these days, experts are more undervalued than ever, it seems like, because people think AI and um, online resources can replace experts, but to me, nothing can replace experience. And that would be the first bit of advice, is that try to find somebody who has more experience than you do and is a professional, and define what professional means in whatever field you're doing. Because a professional, if you want to be a successful cover band or a tribute act, is not the same professional as what I've worked with, right? In terms of being a songwriter.
Right.
The
Yep.
other piece of advice I would give to anybody who is stuck uh, creatively, specifically for songs, is if you can't sit on the couch and write a song with your acoustic guitar, it does not mean you can't write songs. Because I struggle with that. I can't even really do it. I've done it a couple of times. But one of the best writing tools actually is right here. I've had this since I had piano lessons when I was a kid, is a metronome. So don't forget that you don't need to have an acoustic guitar to be a songwriter. You could just, you could start with that, or try a bass. Even if you could barely play bass, try writing a bass line, right? So that advice paired with have somebody who can help you, I think that really prepares you for a lot of different challenges that you can overcome in this struggle.
That's super interesting. I mean, obviously I'm chuffed to hear about like with experts. I do think that it's tough when I think that there has been this flattening out of technical knowledge because of AI. And that's true. Like that's just a straight up fact. If like for knowledge based professions, um, but you're so right that it doesn't replace experience and it has zero anything in terms of values. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading a lot of, I keep up to date and I've been a regular user of, LLMs since they came out. And I find it fascinating to see who gains or sees the value in what from these things. And it's really interesting to me that like I really do think that like in a future where all of the knowledge is available, everybody has access to it at the same time. What's the thing that differentiates people? It's our conclusions that we draw. It's our
Right.
opinions. It's our vision, what we see, our perspective. So anyone who's willing, who's hiding behind the data or hiding behind um what is technically true, the logic,
Mm-hmm.
this is coming for them specifically, and you're going to have to put yourself on the line in the future a lot more. But also that's also going to bring its own challenge because yeah, it turns out you're going to be wrong a lot more. You're not going to just
Right.
get to like hide in plain sight or anywhere for that matter. You're going to have to stick your fucking neck out. You have to take risks.
Yeah. And if you're lucky, you're going to fail fast. But the only way to do that is by being open to that criticism, which I think, like you're saying, all these technical resources, they're not really going to criticize you, right? They're going to give you all the information, but they're not going to break it down.
Sure.
So they can't build you back up, because getting more to, on the nose of what I was saying earlier about, hey, if you can't sit down with an acoustic guitar and write a song, does not mean you're not a songwriter. When I started to meet with Neil, first of all, I didn't even bring an instrument, right? We would just sit down and say, okay, I want to write a song that has this type of groove. And okay, what are the chords? Okay, they're starting with a 6. We're going to start with a 1, right? Okay, they're going to a 4. We're going to go to a 2, whatever. But he would sit there and do it quickly because he's a professional, right?
Right.
And he would lay down a drum groove, usually just a drum groove, which, by the way, also you can sing along to a drum groove. Even if you can't play drums, that is where you can use technology for your benefit, right? Um, and then I would get it in my email and I'd listen to it in my truck as I drove around. And that's how you hopefully you space out. One piece of advice I did give for somebody that was very good was that the feeling of being in motion when you're trying to be creative is really beneficial for some reason. Go sit on a train, go for a walk, but to also just sit
Walk.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
to just sit there is really difficult.
You
Literally
know,
because it feels like you're just sitting with yourself and it's not good. So when I would drive around, it's like, okay, yeah, there's I think the verse. Okay, but I don't have the chorus. I'm gonna try again tomorrow and try again in a few days. Because one of the things that I learned is that, well, that's how I like to write. And with my band, that's how it is too. I'm not going to come to you guys and say, okay, here's something I got. Again, does it happen? Sometimes, but rarely. Usually it's, okay, here's a musical idea. Now you play it because you're a better player than I am. And now this is what I think the bass should do. This is how the drum should go. Let's write an arrangement right now. And then let's record it and then give it to me for a few weeks. And then it's on me. Then you guys have done your job. If I don't do anything with it, and I'm your leader, then I failed you. And I can accept that. Of course, the idea is that you want to have a lot of ideas so that you don't just have to rely on one. But
right.
again, all those things have been the most pleasure of the whole project is learning what my process is. And is it going to change? Probably. But right now it's working. And I think some of it is always going to be universal. And again, just learning that you got to identify what your passion is in the process because it's probably not going to be all parts and realize when it's time to do your work and finish your work.
I love that. I mean, I had to go back to the, motion thing because, fun fact, I don't know if you knew this, but another musician who has to be in the car to help with the writing and the listening and the music writing process is Neil Young. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
Oh, no, I didn't
yeah,
know that. Good
I watched a
Canadian lad.
documentary. Yeah, exactly. And I watched a documentary on him, and I think while I was living in the UK too, which made me so homesick. Actually,
Yeah.
there were so many things that made me homesick during the from 2015 to 2020. There's so many things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but one of them was that Neil Young documentary, and yeah, he would like he'd just get in the car, and in fact, in the documentary, he's like in the car talking about how that's so important to the process. I just thought it was interesting, like especially as a guy who follows has the like great Canadian rock and roll heroes. I figured that'd be a fair bit
Yes.
of
That's really nice
alpha
to
for
know.
you,
Yes. Yeah. And,
right?
and
It's validating in a
I,
way,
I,
isn't
it's
it?
very validating, and I wouldn't have known that if I didn't seek out the help of a professional to help me along the way, because I didn't even really realize that that would be a thing you could do, right? Just email yourself something and then throw it onto your vehicle.
Yeah,
Didn't think that that's what songwriting was, but that's what it can be, right?
yeah. That's the thing is like if it works, if it's stupid and it works, it's not fucking stupid, man. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, or if
exactly.
it doesn't have like this isn't what so and so did, and it's like that doesn't fucking matter at all. Like, does it make you? Does it help you do your thing? Yes, then no to whatever else there is. Like, simple as
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. Because one of the other things on a bit of a lighter note too is like, well, what part do substances play in all this process, right? Because that's a big part of rock and roll as well. And nowadays,
True.
obviously, we're a lot more aware of some of the slippery slopes of all that stuff. But on my part, I've never really had much of a vice for anything drug or alcohol related. But if you're in the times where I've been really stuck, in a Canadian fashion, you smoke a bit of weed, you just see what the guy on the other side thinks. And you might wake up in the morning and be like, yeah, that guy had no good ideas. But sometimes it's a back and forth thing, right? Where it's like your sober self is like, okay, no, this is what he's trying to do. This makes sense. Now let me just work on this. But sometimes it's like, I just need somebody to throw me a lot of ideas, whether they're good or bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes that side of the personality, which is still you, right, needs to have a bit of a voice for a second. So I'm not going to share that we're outside of the advice column now. We're just talking, but that part of it too, I kind of realized in the process. And it did turn on me towards the end. I found like the more that I relied on that, the more it wasn't reliable.
Interesting.
So I think it's also important to mention that. I'm not trying to say, if you're stuck creatively, smoke a joint and hits are gonna fall from the sky. But, you know,
What you're,
it's
I
not.
think what I'm hearing is that like it's okay to like consult and pivot and try something else. sidestep to a different avenue when you're stuck
Yeah,
creatively.
because like another way, a more healthier way could be like maybe try writing at 6 in the morning, right? Or in my case, if I get back from a gig and it's 2 a.m. and I want to go to bed, yeah, maybe just write a little bit of that part of the day. You know, somebody gave me that advice once. They're like, you're at your most creative in the morning because your mind is the clearest, right? And your instincts kind of come to a head.
So use it
So
for that instead of anything else.
yeah, use it. Yeah, exactly. And just
Interesting.
record it. And yeah, you might not like it today. You might not like it tomorrow. Maybe you'll never like it, or maybe you will like it in a week or so, you know?
Uh, that leads into like inspiration and routine. Do you believe in waiting for inspiration or forcing yourself to work until it comes?
Definitely the latter. Um, I think, I, I think this process has taught me that waiting is never really, I mean, see, there's a difference between time being a critical ingredient.
Mm.
Um, but waiting to me, that is a trap door
Mm-hmm.
because the idea is hopefully you're not just working on one thing either, right? If you've got my magic number is usually three, right? It's nice to kind of have a ballad to work on. It's nice to, and they're always at different timelines, right? Okay, my ballad only has a lyric right now, right? My ballad only has a melody, whereas my 12 bar blues, that's got a groove, right? And that's got maybe a guitar lick, but none of the lyrics are there yet. Versus maybe I've got a lyrical piece and it's somewhere I don't know what it is. So the idea is that, well, this one's waiting. I can work on this one, right? Because there are the things that require time to me are usually the critical pieces. I'm not denying that, right? That it usually is going to be your lyrics for me. But the things that don't take time shouldn't be waited for either, which is finishing an arrangement, you know, or just booking a meeting with somebody to go start something. That
Yeah.
does not require waiting, and it shouldn't require waiting. I don't know if that was a good answer, but it's a good question that I'm going to think about.
No, I mean, there. It feels like that's one of the few questions that I ask where I feel like there's a right answer, and I feel like you answered correct, so to speak. I mean, just because I think it's the way, but I mean, like, it is
Because
such
you
a
agree.
easy.
Yeah.
It's a 100%. Like, absolute. Like, you don't
Yeah.
like what you wrote, fuck you, go back and do it again. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
show up every single fucking day.
Yeah.
Waiting for it has been the reason why I've lost so much time.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
lost so many opportunities because I have waited. Because I had
Yeah.
this bullshit. I had so many fucking bullshit ideas of how creativity should work. I
Right.
had a Bukowski phase where I was like, oh, I should only be writing when I'm shit faced. And,
Yeah.
that was brutal time because then sure enough, go figure, it turns out that you just want to drink. You don't actually want to write.
Right.
Uh, and then like, oh, the muses and inspiration, and I have to cultivate those things. And it's like, I get what you're trying to convey, but
Hmm.
also when the muse does come upon you, you know what I mean? Like, let's assume that that shit's true for just a second.
Which I think it is. Yeah. So go on.
Sure. And that, so that inspiration happens upon you. Do you want to be sat at your desk writing, or do you want to be in the shower? Like, just playing the numbers game here.
Hmm.
Because I want to be already working when that shit hits. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
maybe there's the inspiration from a walk or what have you. But if you are already a well oiled machine, that shit's going to be part of a system as opposed to a nice notion that you never fucking get around to.
That's just it. Because you have to set your system up for yourself, right? And again, using technology, there's definitely no excuse for not having a system,
There's
right?
so few excuses for it.
There's
Yeah.
so few excuses because I think what you're talking about, right, is like, and I'll do this too. Like sometimes I'll be out with buddies and somebody will say something like, that's a great lyric. And I'll write it down. And maybe that's my muse moment, right? Or maybe it's like I'm saying, just about to fall
Yeah.
asleep or I just get up. But if you don't write it down, I don't know, it's kind of on you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest lie I tell myself, I think anyone tells themselves is, oh, I'll remember that. fuck
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
No, you won't.
exactly.
No, you
Never.
won't.
Yeah.
You really won't. And then the
Y-
worst feeling in the world is when you're like sitting there just trying to summon up the memory of something that you feel like you should know, and it's like it's not coming.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. I've gotten a little bit better because now that the writing phase of this project is concluded, I took somebody's advice, which is, okay, now just go back to listening. Just give yourself a break here and go back to listening and just look for new things to do for next time you want to get a at bat. So lately, when I've had some ideas, I've been like, you know what? I'm gonna see if some things stick. And I've got one melody. I'm not gonna sing it right now. It's a little early in the day for me. That has been in my head for a while, and I'm like, okay, well, I got to do something with it because it's in my head. So I will. But getting back to your point about waiting, because like I just said, I think it is okay to take a pause and give yourself some grace. You know,
Hmm.
sort of like what that Vienna song by Billy Joel is to me kind of all about. Um,
Hmm.
when you are feeling like you're ready and you're stuck, I guess we're back on the advice thing. You got me on an advice kick now. What I'll do is again, I'll just book a meeting with somebody and just say, hey, and whether it's somebody like new I want to work with or existing, it's like, hey, and don't book it for tomorrow. I'll say, hey, can we meet in 2 weeks? Right. And now you're working against a deadline because deadlines are also a key tactic too, right?
Mm,
For
that's
certain
cool. So
things.
that's interesting because, like, for some people, like they fold like a goddamn
Hmm.
pizza box when it comes to having a timeline, but for other or a deadline, but for others that works, and for you it obviously works.
Yes.
I do think that having some sort of timescale deadline has helped me various areas. I guess in terms of like inspiration and routine, and is there like a specific ritual or habit or environment that helps you get into a creative headspace?
Hmm. I wish there was, man. Not really. My my bandmates and I have gone out to a cabin um way out in the bush several times with the idea, and we've carried guitars on toboggans and like, oh, here we're gonna have a spiritual experience and we're
You
gonna
are
go be
so
inspired by
Canadian in this fucking moment,
yeah.
by the way. That's
Yeah, and
so
this is
sick.
absolutely true. And
That's
we've done it
very
more than I'm
cool though.
and when I wrap up the story, I'll be even more Canadian because we uh we hike our way up there. It's like a 2 hour hike. You know, we're sweating by the time we get there and we get the beautiful foothills of the Rockies. And we're like, hey, we're gonna be inspired here. And then we just get hammered for the entire time. The entire time we're there. And just don't do anything. And then we're like, okay, well, we got it out of our system. Next time will be great. And then we just do it all over again. So that's what I've learned too, right? Is like, yeah,
Oh shit.
we don't live in a world anymore, or probably in a musical economy anymore, where we're gonna sit in a circle for 8 hours a day and just hope something comes up. Like a lot of the work is independent, and just
Yeah.
having it part of your routine to get to your question is just, okay, well, what 2 to 3 songs am I working on? Yeah, let me just sing that over a few times and as I drive around or while I'm walking around my apartment until I feel like I got it. If I'm really stuck, maybe I'll consult the guy on the other side, and yeah, like just chipping away at it is kind of the only way that I can answer the question. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because like that talks about the context of the creative process, but like when you're feeling inspired, I have a flip side of that question, which is like, what non-musical things inspire your songwriting the most? And now I'm talking like films, books, people, places, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I'm inspired mostly by our country. And let me try to explain that because I think the power of songs is what they can do for the people that listen to them. And I know that sounds broad, but particularly in a country as young as Canada, where we're still trying to identify ourselves, I'm just inspired by like the narrative that we that we tell ourselves from my perspective. And that's the only inspiration I could really think to come up with. Yeah, what I like about, books and movies is that they're all input, right? When you're working on something. Um, I think one thing Neil told me once is like, I've read, well, actually, I'll tell you my own story. I worked on this song that didn't make it on the album called Last Best West. And I wanted to learn more, refresh myself on Canada's history. So I bought this little book of Canadian history. It was all politics. I mean, in 1980, the act of this was, and it didn't do it for me. So I
Mm,
bought this book of letters from the 1600s to 1980, when people kind of stopped writing letters. And I was like, this is more what I'm talking about, right? Just stories from random people from to other people.
interesting.
That seemed to give
Huh.
me more insight into what our country was about. And I still have it. And it's really good inspiration. And I don't use as much as I should, but that's the other thing too. I know if I'm slumping, it's probably the first question is, okay, well, what have you been inputting? Have you been watching new movies, new shows? Have you been reading new books? Right? Because that's the only way to come up with new ideas for me if I'm totally in the gutter stuck. So I read this story about this official who was sent from Ottawa to go to Dawson City, which around the 1800s was the second biggest city besides Winnipeg in Canada. And it was during the gold rush. So he had
Okay.
basically went because he had heard that there was a lot of illegal activity going on up there in the mining community. So being from a mining town, I was interested in that story. And basically his letter back to the officials was, yeah, you can shut all this stuff down. There's definitely illegal gambling, prostitution going on. But if you shut it down, all these people are going to be screwed. It's probably going to be worse off. So I thought that was like just such a hilarious concept. I wrote a song called Last Best West because the actual Last Best West was a totally different event, but I just liked the sound of that. So I wrote most of the song, but then I read an entire book on a flight somewhere, and I really stole two or three lines from that one entire book. So maybe I should give myself a bit more credit here. Maybe I do use this stuff more than I realized, but the only place I used it was I was stuck in the second verse, and I had Chief Wilson was my guiding hand through each bend and bloody clan he led me through when I was stuck on that. And then somewhere in the book it said he was humming his tune. So I was like, okay, humming his tune of virtue. And so I from that entire book, I was like, okay, well, I got one line out of that.
It's a lot more than some books, I'll tell you.
Yeah, well,
But
yeah.
that's great. Like it means that you take inspiration when it comes, and I like that we can steal as artists, like stealing
Mhm.
like an artist. Like it's where we get that these clips and bits, and they inform other entirely new things.
Well,
So
that's a
this
good
is
way
the
of putting it,
portion.
right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
like Steve Jobs said, right? Like bad artists copy, great artists steal. And that's what you're talking about. Copying is basically modern country music, and we don't want to do that, right? Okay, I got my dig in on country music, so I'm good. You
Nicely
can wrap
done.
up.
Nice. Respect. Good.
Yeah.
No, very good stuff. Yeah. This is the part of the show where I'm gonna give you that chance to promote, my friend, because we're coming up to the end of it, and I want to give you like all the shameless plugging that you can. Um, you know, catch you at such and such site, see you, follow you here,
Yeah.
listen there. Like, let's do it. Because Garrett Barbuto and the Hot Pursuit. That is the name of your band.
That is the name of our band. This solo project will not be under that name. It'll just be under my name, which we're going to start playing shows in Q1 2026. So you can stay up to date on my Instagram, which is Garrett Barbuto Music. And I'm hoping if you're in Calgary, this album is for you. It's sort of my love letter and token of appreciation for all the goodness that Calgary has done for me since moving here. So this album is going to be for Calgary, and we're going to try to do as much as we can in the community to promote the album. We want to work with as much local businesses as we can, including record stores, and radio stations. So follow along with the journey because we're going to be pushing it. And we're hoping that we're going to be kind of putting up a mirror to the beauty of Western Canada with the release of this album.
Nice. Where can people catch you? At where you're most active? Which platform, profile, etc.?
I would say Instagram is where we communicate the most.
Interesting. What's your handle?
Handle is Garrett Barbuto Music. If you want to follow the Hot Pursuit, it's the Hot Pursuit YYC.
Nice. And upcoming projects, we're going to be a little bit cagey and a little bit private about that, so we're not going to say too much. But basically, watch this space is the best that we can do, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're gonna hopefully release the singles kind of one by one, so they'll be very segmented in that regard, and eventually we'll have the whole album out by the end of 2026.
Nice. Well, it was a pleasure to speak with you, Garrett, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you got cooking.
Yes, thanks, partner. I appreciate the time.